Hello, my friends. Welcome back. And we are going to continue on this series. This will be part 3. And on our last video, we left off on the connections with Werner von Braun and his connections to all of the things that we were looking at in the previous videos. So we're going to lead straight in right where we left off. And again, I'm gonna have stuff on the screen, so I may not follow exactly along with what's on there, but I want you to see it. You can screenshot, that way you can always I always am trying to present information that you can go verify. That's kind of the point. Most things are, especially when we're getting into the subject matters we're talking about, most of these kind of things just are very hard to believe, even with verifiable evidence, unless you look for yourself. There really is a key to that, because once you do it yourself, you're engaging your own mind and you're putting the effort in, but it's also at that point it's a choice. You are choosing to explore something on purpose. And when you do that, your perception and your ability to receive information changes. So I always encourage, now I've got friends that absolutely can take verifiable facts, chew them, and if they can't find any reason outside of it to deny it, they're very willing to accept it, apply it to what they believe, and continue moving forward. But that's not most of us. I would call that the rare occasion. But bless those people, because letting go of lies and accepting truth is very difficult until you start doing it. Once you start, it becomes a lot easier because you realize what it is that you're doing and you understand how it changes your life. So information is important. Seeking knowledge is important. Confirming what you believe is important. It doesn't just end with belief. We should also pursue knowing. So I want to present you with information, but I also want you to be able to find it yourself. So with that being said, like I said, the last episode, we looked at different anomalies about recent events in the sky and things that did or didn't happen, areas of significance, what may the bigger picture have been about why we were seeing such attention on certain areas in particular, and what those areas have meant significantly through history regarding energy and electromagnetic fields and historical monuments across the world that were built in these very specific areas that seem to have been known throughout history. And so we touched on that. We touched on a lot of technology that very few of us are aware of at all, but is very much in plain sight and can be researched, and patents that have been presented. I've covered lots of different technology patents that pertain to what we're looking at, and that's where we're at up to now. And so as we left off, Werner von Braun. So if you're not aware, this is the NASA scientist that is credited with the Apollo missions that went to the moon. Okay? So, important background here. And I want to preface also, obviously you can see where we're going with this on the screen, but I want to make a side note that the first thing we're looking at here is that Werner von Braun was a member of the Nazi Party. So he was a Nazi scientist. And he was in the rocket technology development sector for the German Nazi army. Okay? So that's where we're starting at. Now, the reason I want to preface here is because, much like the cartels of today, Not everybody that works for them necessarily chose to or was willing. Cartels today, and this is not disputed, will absolutely just walk into a home, find any male members of the household that are of working age, and they will take them and tell them, if you don't come work for us, we will kill your whole family. And in some cases, they will kill a child in front of them just to prove that they're serious. And so, I mean, this is not anything to, it's not new. And these kind of tactics have been used throughout all of ancient history, war tactic. I mean, this is not new. So, we gotta at least take a grain of salt on, it's very possible this man wanted nothing to do with this. So, we can't assume that he necessarily by default is an evil person. I just kind of want to make that preference there, because we don't know all of that. And so that's a possibility. And based on what we kind of see toward the end of his life, that seems like it might have been. But we'll get into that. So with that being said, we've established that this is a Nazi scientist. So, as you can see on the screen here, at the end of the war, he, along with 1,600 or so other scientists, engineers, technicians, were taken secretly out of the war by the United States Army and the government. And they did this under Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip took these scientists and they positioned them throughout South America, Central America, and the United States in governments, research, and science divisions all over the Americas. And they did it in secret. So, most were not aware that the man that was credited to taking them to the moon, or alleged to have taken to the moon, was actually a Nazi scientist that had been brought over from Germany. So, that's something to be considered. Now, also, as you can see here, he worked with Walt Disney on a series of films, popularizing the ideas of space travel. So, there's some connections here, alright? Now, with that being said, we'll just take a little glance here. You can kind of see a little bit of the details. Now, this is where it gets a little more interesting. So, upon my preface, that we've seen in numerous occasions throughout history that people, when they are close to death, will sometimes have a moment of clarity or guilt or something where they must unload something. They've been holding on to a secret, they've been holding on to a lie. Very recent times, there's the famous woman that had accused a slave, a black slave, of raping her. And he was convicted on her testimony, and he was killed. And upon her deathbed, she did acknowledge and admit that she lied, and that he actually did not do that to her. So, things like this have happened, and it's no new phenomenon. So, is it possible that this scientist on his way out decided to unload his burdens a bit? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So, considering the Apollo mission and that he's accredited for, and that they went to the moon, on his gravestone, which you see here, very clearly referencing Psalms 19:1 from the Christian Bible, which is the following: The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So, in case you're not familiar, the firmament is the invisible, impenetrable dome, if you will, or the invisible covering that is protecting the earth. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Okay? So, this is also the cosmology of every ancient civilization throughout time. Shared this same understanding of what our world looked like, what the earth comprised of. So, of course, in modern times, our science narrative, that is no longer what is being taught. So, considering that at the time it was, and this gentleman is the one who supposedly took us to the moon, why would he, on his exit, inform us of that particular biblical scripture that is referencing an impenetrable dome that you cannot get out of? Well, that seems like a wink wink, maybe even a chuckle laugh, I don't know. But he's making a very clear statement of something. So if you look now, gentleman on the screen, is the director of the CIA. And in 1981, he stated, "We will know our disinformation program is complete when everything the U.S. public believes is false." So considering who this is, that's a pretty telling statement. And considering we looked into the last videos, statements from John D. Rockefeller stating that he doesn't want a nation of thinkers, he wants a nation of workers. And he is also, and his foundation are the ones responsible for creating the entirety of the U.S. education system. It looks like there's definitely not the incentive that we have been presented with, that what we're told and what we're taught is fact and we should believe it. Because the same people telling that to us are also the ones telling us that they don't want us to know anything, and they just want us to work, and they want us to believe that everything is exactly what they want us to believe it is. So we definitely have some double talk, of course. Now, continuing with von Braun, one of his colleagues was Carol Rawson. And I'm going to start moving a little faster so you can get through some of this stuff. So, one of his colleagues, toward the end of his life, sat down with him, and her credentials are on the screen. She sat down with him, and he had basically, a session of unloading. And he told her a lot of things on his way out. And she eventually was interviewed by someone where they accounted for all of these conversations and disclosures and informations. And Wernher von Braun's Last Words to the World is the title, if you're looking for that interview. We won't go through all of it, but there's some key points that we just want to go over quickly. Again, the message that von Braun was giving me continually was that we must prevent the weaponization of space from happening, because otherwise the truth would never be officially acknowledged about who we are, who we are as a human species in the universes. So one of his biggest concerns is the weaponization of space. And if you're watching any news, there's numerous countries that are in discussions of trying to create, including in the United States, a space weaponry or space armies or space divisions. So the things being discussed are exactly what he was warning needed to be prevented. And he gives a little bit more information further on. So the questions in what you're looking at here are being asked by the interviewer, and the answers are coming from Carol Rossi. So that's the back and forth you're seeing here. So the question is basically is why he gave you an enemies list that would be perpetuated. That's right, he repeated this continuously. He would say that starting where I entered the industry with the supposed Russian threat, but never actually existed. The Russians were made to be the enemy. Then there would be terrorists, third world country threats, there would be an asteroid threat. So what he's talking about at the beginning of this is at what point in the narrative he entered into this whole space, rocket, all of these different World War, all of the enemies involved. So as he entered into the industry of this narrative, he's saying at that time, Russia was the supposed threat, but that's not true. Okay? So he's also saying that after that, there will then be terrorists. And then after that, we're going to have threats from third world countries. And then after that, the threat's going to be an asteroid. So he's giving a handful of different things that are coming, moving forward, that are eventually going to lead up to the possibility of weaponization in space. So after that, he's they might even say to us to try to influence the public into believing that there are many reasons for why we should put weapons in space. There might be a reason to protect our assets in space. So he's providing the different topics and areas, basically, of disinformation and propaganda that are going to be, so a list of propaganda that are going to be perpetuated in order to convince us that these threats are real and that we need to move forward with this. So then he goes on, but the real one, so basically the real propaganda item, but the real one that he was always holding off on and would say again with tears filling his eyes every time he said to me repeatedly, was that the last card they are holding is the alien card, the extraterrestrial card, and none of them are hostile. So in addition to this run of propaganda items that were going to be perpetuated to the world and the public, the biggest one, and the one that scared him the worst, was them potentially trying to use the alien card. And remember right before, he's talking about they may try to get us to convince the public that there are many reasons for having weapons in space. So, aliens, if you can convince, if they use that card, that might be the one that convinces people we need to put things up there. And so he's saying they'll try to play that card. However, none of them are hostile. So it's a lie. In any way he could say those words, the intonation was always on. None of them are hostile. It's all a lie. So, summarizing now that, based on whatever is being stated here, that there is a series of propaganda that are to be carried out, each of them leading toward one large card at the end, that hopefully when that card is played, that will be enough to convince us to allow them to move forward with what it is that they're trying to do by putting weapons in space. So he's also making it very clear that this is a lie, okay? And all of these different intentions are so that they can continue gaining ground, keeping truth from us. So the question The interviewer now is asking, meaning the implication is that the United States government, perhaps even in cooperation with authorities in Russia, have played a game of perpetuating enemies in order to keep the money flowing into the war machines, ? And Carol responds, actually, von Braun never implied that the Russians were part of this. He implied to me that the kernel of it was in the United States, and that this had to be stopped. And he thought, as a woman in those days with curly hair and short skirts, she could get into any meeting where a man could probably never say the things that he could. I paraphrased a bit there so you can get the gist of, I say it gets a little confusing when you're trying to keep up with who's talking there. So, von Braun was, she's getting to the point there that the reason that he gave me this information is because he was under the impression that because of how I looked and the times I could get away with saying some things and asking questions that he as a man could not get away with. So, reason why he's disclosing these things to her, and he's concerned and he wants someone to be able to continue trying to further this effort, and that she is likely to have the best chance just based on the time and position she's in. Okay? So, like I said, we're not going through the whole thing there. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of, you know, the information that's available to us about this guy and toward the end of his life. And if you're looking at the time that this was, you know, published, and all the things that have happened since then, well, we have seen each of those different propagandas come forward, and we've seen them play out. And now we are at a point where we are hearing these ideas about weapons in space and space forces attached to our militaries. So, you know, we're taking him as a whole with a grain of salt, but based on the things he said, it appears that so far he wasn't lying. A lot of these things lined up and happened as he said they would. And again, he's also left us a little breadcrumb on his gravestone, implying there is a firmament. So people don't do things like that and disclose all of these kind of details and them actually come to fruition if they're just lying, or they're part of, you know, they're running a scam of their own, you know, trying to help it. It doesn't fit. So I would say we owe it at least some consideration. So, like I said, we kind of have summarized that. Now, considering what we looked at in the last few videos of the idea of Project Bluebeam and what that is based on, and the technology that's required for that to happen, and the technology absolutely exists. We looked at the patents. The reason for doing it is certainly there. The number of things they could accomplish by doing it, and the amount of control that could be gained, would be substantial. And again, like I said, via predictive programming, we've already seen in film this exact storyline as the plot of a major blockbuster film. So the idea's there, the technology's there, the incentives are there, the motives are there. So this is definitely, you know, this is a tool in the bag. It's a weapon in the arsenal that we need to be aware of, because it absolutely could be carried out. And like I said, just picture whatever propaganda movie they want to create, and they can just project that movie into the sky. And that absolutely can be done. It's already being done, and I provided those in the previous videos you can go find, and it'll blow your mind. So all those things are real, and there is verifiable evidence you can find that will show you that for decades, multiple government agencies have been working directly with Hollywood Some of them even to the extent of basically handwriting scripts. So this is absolutely been done, and like I said, a lot of this is hard to believe, but when you can find the information for yourself and connect the dots, it's not so far-fetched. So if they can work with the propaganda agencies and the media, not just Hollywood, and work these narratives together, you picture something like Independence Day, and based on what we saw from Ronald Reagan quotes, that movie is basically a carrying out of exactly what they would want that to look like. So if we saw something like that, it would fit exactly into that narrative. And it would probably accomplish exactly what they were trying to. World unification. One world, everything. And based on the interpretations we've gotten from Werner von Braun, this whole thing would be a hoax, of course. And it would be a skewing of the real truth and information they have. So when we keep that in mind, these are the kind of things we can keep an eye out for. If we see something like that, we've got good reason to pause and not just buy it. Okay? Because, like I said, if they can paralyze people in fear with an Independence Day looking event, well, quickly after, just like in the Hollywood film we covered in the last video, shortly after, a hero character of some kind that would fit the descriptions for lots of people would come swooping in to save the day, and a lot of people would believe this. So, considering how complex their capabilities are, it's very, very possible. And we've got insiders that have been giving us this information for quite a while now. We've got a couple plus decades of different people reporting this information. So, all of that being said, we've also got some other connections to that if you saw my other video, you saw this, which was a facility in Chile. And that, if you watch the video, I show you, this image is from Google Earth. And that laser, those two lasers are shooting so far up into the sky, you can turn the camera straight up and it doesn't disappear. So, the projection abilities. So, what we're trying to look at here and parallel is significance of size, significance of technology. How much technology and power would be needed for this kind of stuff? And we can see there's some pretty wild stuff already out there that's doing stuff that looks and sounds very much like this line of thinking. And it's starting to look a lot like this. So, all of that just to kind of round out the ideas of, what could happen with technology, who's given us some of this information, and how it was accounted for. So, all of that in a nutshell, we shouldn't be discarding the possibility of this happening. So, we need to be aware of it and just keep an eye out. So, with that, I'm gonna move away from this stuff for a little while, because it's the groundwork for us to now go way, way backwards. So we're gonna take a trip way back to the flood times. And within the flood, regardless of, which perspective of the world you have, religious, not religious, Christian, not Christian, religious but not, whatever area of the world and belief system it is, this flood is paralleled across them. So regardless of which perspective you want to have on it, even science alone will tell you that this event took place. There was a massive cataclysm of a flood, okay? So we don't even have to narrow it down, too much based on that, because this is an accepted event across worldwide timelines. Now, there's certainly debate on detail, but where I want to go from here is to go far enough back for us to look at technology that could have existed in ancient times. What information we have that might tie some of that together, that can give us another trail of evidence that will bring us back to the current and actually keep explaining some of the things we're already looking at. Because if we can understand some of the ancient history that was available to us, and then we look at the provided history that lands in between, there's some other possibilities available that then tie into our narrative a lot stronger, that have a lot more evidence. And so I want to go to that next. And like I said, it'll seem like we're jumping completely into a different neighborhood. And in a way we are. But sometimes we have to go back far enough that we kind of get away from and prior to the possible manipulations of timelines, history, and the tampering of ancient documents and so on. Sometimes we got to go way back to get some clarification on things, because we can't necessarily trust the information that's here in front of us today, because we know how many hands and how many people have touched it, and that history is written by the winners. So it's not to be taken at face value. So sometimes we got to go way back to clarify some of the things that are happening now. So we'll stop this one here, but just keep in mind on the next one, we are going to shift a bit. And over the next couple, we'll lay out some information, we'll tie it back around and complete a whole loop. All right. Well, that will be it for this one, and blessings to you, and have a wonderful day.